I'm Larry Farrell. I just gave the keynote address here at the AFS Technologies Conference, and the topic was corporate entrepreneurship, and to the audience it was how to be more entrepreneurial in their jobs, in their companies.
Tell me a little bit about why you feel AFS in particular for 30 years has lasted. You talked about manufacturing versus technology.
Well, it was just a coincidence that when I was asked to come here that I learned that this is the company's 30th anniversary, and the 30-year mark is such an important factor in our research and in my speeches. So I thought I better pay attention to that. But it is true that AFS would be fairly typical, I would think. Been a very successful company, growing and growing and growing. Now you have 500, 600, 700 people. And so these things begin to set in now. So now's the time to take a look and see what can we do to keep the growth moving. We don't want to become overly managed. We want to keep this new product development spark alive and this entrepreneurial spirit alive. And I'm heartened by what I've seen here, that I think there's a lot of new managers in AFS who actually come from fairly entrepreneurial backgrounds, and they've been brought in, and this is quite interesting. This is unusual. Usually when the entrepreneurial team retires or leaves, the company is hired by MBA type managers, and I jokingly claim that's a recipe for disaster, but it is not helpful sometimes. And so it's good to see that AFS is trying to maintain this link between entrepreneurial spirit and decent management practices, and that's what it takes to last 100 years. And that's what it takes. Most companies don't last that long. The average age of a company in America is about 40 years. That's it.
AFS has been around for 30 years. Why is it some companies can last 30 years and others don't? What do you think the connection is?
Well, 30. I say in my speeches and my books that 30 to 35 years is a critical time for most companies. They've gotten past the startup phase. They're a successful company. They've had probably 10, 20, 25 years of pretty good growth. And then they get big. That's what happens. You get big because you're successful, you grow, and you get big. You have 500 people, you used to have 5. So everything, the policies and procedures begin to get enacted. You get all kinds of new rules and regulations, but it's all well intended to help manage the bureaucracy, the size. But this tends to slow down most companies. Things slow down. New product introductions slow down, marketing ideas slow down, and so on. So most companies that we've researched, they tend to go into a period of relative decline at around 30, 35 years of age. And if they can't fix that, if they can't get back into that entrepreneurial high growth mode, they go into survival and death. And as I said in the speech, 86% of big American companies follow this very predictable pattern. And it's tough to beat the life cycle, it really is, but it takes extraordinary people at the top to recognize the cycle, first of all. And then not overly manage the business. Keep the entrepreneurial spirit alive. Do we need good management? Of course, but we don't need 99% management. We need about 20% good management and 80% entrepreneurial spirit to keep a company growing.
And do you find that the fact that AFS deals with software is an important factor versus manufacturing or any other sector?
The reason it's important is that you're in a fast-moving sector, and that keeps you on your toes. You would be out of business in a heartbeat if you didn't remain on your toes and innovative, because you're in such a fast-moving sector of industry. If you were making bed mattresses, the technology for that hasn't changed much probably in 50 years or 100 years, then you begin to get complacent, you lose your research impetus and so on. In this kind of an industry, in high-tech, software development and so on, you can't rest on your laurels for 6 months because you'll be outstripped by a small company. And there's no secret that the cost of entry into this kind of an industry is not so high. A young group of guys or gals from college, they can come in and develop a piece of software that's maybe superior to yours, and it doesn't cost them that much money. So you're in a situation where you're almost forced to be more entrepreneurial to survive a week. So that's good for you.
You spoke a little bit about poverty and why some countries, like companies, are poor while others are rich, and you know, it fluctuates.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit more about that? Kind of give us a Cliff Notes version of what you said?
Well, countries tend to live in cycles of prosperity and then poverty, and we see that all around the world. That some countries are getting rich, others are fairly well off, but they're declining. And so the important question, of course, for countries is, what does it take to get prosperous? How can we be like Singapore, Taiwan, South Korea? How can we rise up? Or the United States 100 years ago, what can we do? And so that's a big part of our research, and we have a lot of government clients who want help in that arena.
So if you had to say any one thing out there, Larry, to people who are interested in what you talk about, and in particular to what AFS does, what would you say to them?
I've talked to audiences like this before, and my message to people who are in IT or in process management and so on, that they're in a pivotal part of the company. They may not even realize this sometimes, but the processes they install, the software they install, it can either be quite helpful to growth, or it can actually be kind of a controlling type thing that slows things down. And I want the audience to be aware that they're in a position to propel the growth of the business by the kind of software they install, the way they have it used, perhaps the way they modify it to their own company and so on. And so they're important people in that sense, because we can look at the anatomy of any organization. There's the leadership, and there's the customer base, and there's the product base, but the processes and procedures and practices are what determine how the company behaves every day. And systems people are really important to that. And sometimes I think systems people think their real job is just to do a system, do a good job, but that's not it. They got to be part of the growth of the company and looking for ways to improve the marketing and product research and the growth and so on. That's my message.